Hello, my name is Denim Lovett, and for my final presentation, I chose Understanding the Cultural Model of Communication. I'm diving into this concept today because to me it is the most fascinating thing that I have been able to read in each chapter, but also being able to understand this is important because I believe that it's really the foundation of mass communication. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at what we will be covering today. So today's agenda. Today we're going to talk about the introduction to the communication model. What is the cultural model? We're going to give a real world example, and then we're going to talk about the cultural model in social media, why it's important, and give our final takeaways. So if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to be able to see something called the linear communication model. So the way that this works is that the way that the linear model describes it is someone, and the so-called sender will create a message, and then the receiver will just simply absorb that message. The way that this model works is that it's essentially communication through a two-way street. However, if you know anything about communication, this doesn't really reflect how communication or even media actually works in today's world. That's where the cultural model comes in. So the cultural model offers really a more dynamic view of what communication is. It allows us to realize that the audience doesn't just simply receive the message and that's it. That they bring their own values, their own background, and even sometimes their own life experiences to really consume that message. It's not just about what the sender meant, as the linear model describes it, but it's also about how the audience understands that message. So the key factors or features that play into the cultural model. First, media messages are constructed. They're not something that's neutral or natural. The second thing we learned from the textbook is that the meaning varies. As we talked about earlier in our past slide, the meaning is truly depending on who receives it. Depending on who receives it, depending on their culture, just depending on their background, it varies. And it's not something that's just concrete. The third thing that we understand is that context matters. A person's culture, a person's belief, their values can all change the way that they interpret media. And it really, really plays a pivotal role and shapes it. And finally, the audience is active, not passive. They don't just absorb the message, as the linear model says, but they really help to create that. So let's talk about a real world example and one that we see quite often, to be completely honest with you. And that is going to be in news coverage. If you look at the top right-hand side of this slide, we're able to see several people holding up a sign. One media outlet may post that these protesters are freedom fighters. The other may call them rioters. Both are posting the same photo, but the way that they worded it can truly shift and frame the way that the audience understands the message. Another factor that plays a part in this is the audience's own perspective, what they believe, who they may trust, who they may not trust, and the experiences that they have been through ultimately play a big role in how you interpret a message. And that's why it isn't something that's just as simple as the sender relays a message and you just interpret it the way that they say it. It's something that's unique to each person's own experiences. And so this is a perfect example of the cultural model in action. This is something that we see on a day-to-day basis. News outlets may give coverage on a certain topic and say that it's one way and it's the complete opposite. on another news outlet. So the cultural model in social media. This is something that was important for me to touch because social media plays such a big role in our everyday lives. We are able to access social media at the tap of a finger on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat. The list truly goes on. There are so many forms of social media. And being able to look at how social media takes the cultural model really brings it to a whole new level. We're able to learn that a lot of times users on these apps are not just receiving the message, but they're reshaping them. They're making them their own. A great example of this is we may see someone post a funny image and another person, especially on TikTok recently, can take that image, they can remix it, add their own text and their own caption, make a meme out of it. And it has a completely different meaning than it did previously because they're able to put their own spin on it. This really allows us to realize that media isn't something that's just so simple. It's really a collaborative process. And to me, that is the power of the cultural model. It really has so much meaning behind it, and the meaning can shift so quickly. And even sometimes challenge the way that we see things. And so it's something that's constantly being redefined. And that's the really cool and intriguing thing about it. So why this concept matters? This concept matters for so many reasons. And to me, the biggest reason is that this is something that's important in the real world. I think that it's so essential that the things that we learn about, we can apply to our everyday lives. Yes, the cultural model plays a difference in media and the way that we view media, but it also plays a difference in our everyday lives, and it equips us in so many ways. It helps us to understand media bias, something that we're constantly surrounded by, but sometimes maybe unaware of. It helps with miscommunication, so we're able to better decipher what others may be saying or what they're trying to convey. It allows us to diversify our thoughts. As I said, it challenges you to see things from different perspectives. And it encourages critical media literacy, which is something that's so important in our world. But it also helps us to understand representation. Representation is something that matters so much. I believe that everyone should be able to feel represented in some way in a world that's constantly busy and there's so much chaos. It's important that you are represented in the cultural model of communication. Definitely puts that into play. But it also is the identity of media. As I talked about, I think that the cultural model plays a huge part in media and the way that we know it, and even mass communication. And that's why this concept is something that's so important, and it's something that's important that we study. So my final thoughts and my takeaway, I hope that by the end of this presentation, you were able to gain more knowledge on what the cultural model is. But if you weren't, these are my final two thoughts. The cultural model empowers us to question and to co-create media. It challenges us. It challenges us to see things from ways that we haven't before. It challenges us to be able to co-create media and to consume it in a completely different way. And that's what makes it something that is so powerful. It also allows us to recognize that media isn't a mirror. It's not something that, you see your reflection, that's about it. It's a conversation. It's something that's ever changing and constantly growing, and it just grows along with us. So these are my sources that I used in today's presentation. All of them played a major role in this presentation. And that's all I have for you today. I hope that by the end of this, you understand what the cultural model is and love it just as much as I do. I believe that this is something that's so important for everyone to be able to learn about, for everyone to be able to dive deeper into and explore and really get a deeper understanding of, not just for our communications majors to understand media because this plays such a big difference, but also to us as humans to be able to learn and exercise in the real world.